Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto had Dragon-Hybrd and become Sage of Six Paths of Elemental Nation. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The prank had gone off without a hitch. The Konoha Academy walls of Iruka's classroom, as well as its occupants, were splattered with copious amounts of orange-colored paint. There was only one person who loved this color with such passion. A person whom was currently under a desk holding his sides as he laughed. This person was Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto! Iruka yelled in obvious anger with Mizuki and the students giving equal stares of malice. The stares didn't affect Naruto in the slightest, for that is all he could remember in his 6 years of life. The stares of hate from some of the villagers confused him greatly. But his childlike innocence shrugged it off for the most part. At first, Naruto thought the pranks he pulled were the cause of these stares, but after seeing a civilian being taken by Anbu for muttering something, he began to have other thoughts. So much so, that he went to his GG, better known to all as the Sandaime Hokage, and asked the simple question of why. Hiruzen, the Sandaime, response was that he'd find out when he was older. Although being only 6 years old, Naruto's mind was quite sharp. Add the childlike innocence, and you have one very curious child. This curiosity led him to the library, a place which he would soon find himself at again, but for an entirely different reason. After being pulled from his cover by one of his ears, of which was very painful to the young blonde-haired shinobi hopeful, Iruka gave Naruto a stern lecture about his pranking before assigning him a task he had to complete before returning to class. The task was a hard one for the 6-year-old, but to Iruka he hoped that the difficulty would keep the delinquent out of class, and the shinobi corps, for good. For he knew what Naruto contained as well as the Sandaime's law concerning the events of October 10th. That day was the day Iruka lost his father to the nine-tailed fox. A day which many lost loved ones, all of which harbored hate for the boy whom contained it, Naruto Uzumaki. The law, however, forbade any harm to befall the child as well as any mention of its name. The punishment, public execution via the Sandaime, and a very gruesome one at that, as those to witness such events can attest. Stupid Iruka giving me stupid research. Naruto grumbled to himself as he trudged to the library to complete his task. Pick your favorite topic, he says. I don't even have. The light bulb in his head suddenly brightened. The Hokage. With a smile on his face, Iruka's lecture out of his mind for now, Naruto rushed into the library and instantly went toward the section which detailed the history of Konoha, Hokage included. As he looked around, the librarian, an elder by the name of Megumi, just so happened to be stalking that section. Megumi's black eyes caught sight of the blonde and couldn't help but smile, which seemed to accentuate the wrinkles on her paling, liver-spotted face. Unknown to Naruto, Hiruzen had come to her with the task of helping Naruto to read, write, among other basics. On top of that, she was to give monthly reports on Naruto's progress, of which both her and Hiruzen were impressed with so far. Above average intelligence, ambidextrous, a photographic memory, a good handle on stealth and infiltration capabilities, aka pranking, among other tasks which would help him become a great shinobi if trained properly. However, that childlike innocence still remained, which worried Hiruzen, as Naruto didn't take no or don't do that for an answer. Instead, Naruto saw it as a challenge to do what others could not, a challenge to become the best Hokage there was. Sadly, this mentality would soon lead to Naruto's best, and worst, day of his life thus far. Why the glum face, Naruto? Megumi's grandmotherly tone brought Naruto out of his slump, somewhat. Stupid Iruka-sensei gave me research after I paint-bombed his classroom. Naruto replied with a slight grin forming at the mention of paint bomb. Megumi sighed and shook her head with amusement as she looked around the bookshelf before pulling out 2 books which Naruto was able to read. These should help with your research, future Hokage. Megumi handed the books, one on the history of Konoha, the other on the Hokage, to Naruto, whom took it with a smile. Thanks, Megumi-san. Anytime, but please choose carefully on who to prank next time. Naruto gave the librarian a confused look which made her smile sadly at past memories of why she was a librarian in the first place. But you said pranking was good for infiltration, Naruto. Stealth as well, but the cost of choosing the wrong target can be high. Megumi sighed as Naruto still gave her that confused look. My left leg is false, youngin'. A replacement that Tsunade and Jiraiya both helped make. After an enemy shinobi used my explosive trap against me in the Second Shinobi War. Naruto looked at the leg and all seemed normal, which confused him even more. Apparently his facial expressions portrayed this a little too well, which made Megumi let out a soft chuckle before patting Naruto on the head. It's a genjutsu mixed with a henge, Naruto, something you will learn much later in life. Now go on, take a seat and get to studying. Quote, Naruto nodded and ran to find a seat to begin hours of research, though what Megumi said made the Uzumaki think of apologizing to Iruka. His mind, however, gravitated towards the cooler things a shinobi could do, things he hoped to find in one of these books. 2 hours had passed, and Naruto was ready to fall asleep as he hadn't found anything that interested him. Luckily for him, that was all about to change as he got to the pages which discussed the Sandaime and the Yondaime Hokage being the only Hokages with summoning contracts. Summoning. Naruto read onwards and found that summoning was what that Inu Anbu could do, but instead of monkeys or toads, his was a dog. Sugoi. I wonder if I could get a contract like them. Another thought came to mind shortly after this, and it all dealt with what type of pranks he could pull. Naruto quickly closed the book and went back to the section where Megumi was at and tried to look for a book on how to summon, but no such luck. This irked Naruto to the point where he saw learning how to do this awesome technique as a challenge. Luckily for him, he remembered Inu summoning one of the puppies a couple days ago so that they could play fetch. There was but one problem with this, and that dealt with the hand signs needed. Inu completed these in a fast succession, much too fast for Naruto's eyes to see. Again, Naruto grumbled to himself and decided to call it a day. He checked out the books that Megumi gave him and headed home to see if his academy textbook would be of any help. It was a bow. Okay, he never opened as he thought the teachers would help him progress like any other student. Although a young child, he picked up on the teacher's glares and had a feeling in his gut that he was being taught wrong. Naruto sighed at this. Here he was, but a 6-year-old child with only 5 people he considered friends and no parents to be found. Those 5 were his Gigi, Megumi, Inu, and the Ichirakus, Chuki and Ayame. And although they were a great substitute for parental figures, Naruto wished he had actual parents like everyone around him. He shook those thoughts from his head as he go to the studio-sized apartment the Sandaime gave him. Once inside, he made his way into the kitchen to make some instant ramen. The kettle of water now on the stove, Naruto proceeded into his small bedroom and picked up the academy book by his bedside. After leafing through and finding the section on hand signs, he went to the kitchen table, sat down, and began to read. The only interruption being the kettle whistling and Naruto having to get up to make his ramen from a stash he has in his upper cupboard by the fridge. Hours passed, most being meticulous practice on the 12 hand signs, but in those hours a certain beast had woken up and peered into his container's memories and soon came up with a plan to break out. With a toothy grin and an evil glint in his eye, the Kyuubi pushed a minuscule amount of his chakra past the seal to jumpstart Naruto's chakra network. That done, Kyuubi pushed the memory of the Yondaime summoning a giant toad to crush him just as Naruto was starting to nod off in the chair he was sitting in. Naruto instantly snapped awake and shook the cobwebs out of his head. As much as he wanted to dismiss this as a daydream, everything seemed too real. Even though it was the dead of night, Naruto rushed out of his apartment and went towards a nearby training ground to test the dream he had. Once there he first attempted to bring out his chakra like the academy book had shown. This of course was a success, but it also caught the attention of a couple Anbu whom was guarding Naruto, Inu being one of them. Should we intervene, Taicho? Bor said to Inu whom was next to him. Inu was about to say no, but his eyes widened on what hand signs Naruto was starting to perform. Just as he was about to use Shunshin to halt Naruto in his tracks, a massive surge of Ubi's chakra exploded from Naruto just as he slammed his hands to the ground. While the boy went up in a puff of smoke, the whole village was now wide awake and afraid for their lives. Bor and Inu had no choice but to help calm the villagers, but before that they had to deliver the terrible news to the Sandaime Hokage. The news that Naruto attempted a summon without a contract, with the possibility of the Kyuubi influencing him to do so. In a distant realm, the air was filled with acrid smoke from the many active volcanoes on its mountainous and sparsely forested terrain. Lava pools dotted land as the volcano spewed out its molten interior, with any forest caught in it lit ablaze. One would think that life couldn't possibly be able to function here, but along these mountains were carved out caves. Caves which were large enough to house the giant, scaled creatures that made this place their home. Creatures which were only spoken about in lore. This realm was the home of those lost to time. The dragons. Lord Bahamut, didst thou sense that? An onyx-scaled dragon exclaimed in Old English as it flew into his lord's cavern. "Aye, that I do, my son." Bahamut let out a grin as he chewed, which showed the great size difference between the two. While the lord's son had room to move around the large cavern, Bahamut barely had any, for he was almost twice the size. "Been many a day since we last had a summoner." The son, even though he didn't look it, was nervous. It was something that Bahamut caught, his glowing ember eyes now boring into his son's own. The head dragon didn't have to say anything, for the son knew he had to speak up lest be punished. "The new summoner hath landed in." The son looked at the scar on his right side, a large gash where Bahamut struck him for speaking the traitorous one's name. The dragon lord caught it and roared out for all the realm to hear. The cavern shook, which made rock crumble off the walls, and the dragons under his command to shake with fear. For it was an angry roar. One they heard before, one they heard on that night Alduin, the traitorous one, had helped destroy humanity with that 10-tailed beast. Unlike what lore stated, the dragons were relatively peaceful and good-natured. They had a temper though, one they all learned to control, for the loss of control meant utter devastation to both friend and foe alike. It was for this reason that Alduin was cast away to the farthest edge of their realm and sealed within with the help of the one they called the Enlightened One, the Sage of Six Paths. The roar ended just as Bahamut got out of his cave, his son behind him. With but a nod, both took off with the other dragons not far behind. This was a new era for the dragons, an era which they hoped they would see the world they once inhabited again. However, this era would all be for naught if the one that came to them were to die. Naruto began to cough as the decreased oxygen in this realm had started to affect his overall health. Not only that, he was instantly sweating from the intense heat this world had. From what Naruto could see, as the smoke stung his eyes, this place was hell, the Shinigami's domain. Stant roar sealed that fact, which made his heart pump faster and his breathing to quicken. As Naruto started to shake in fear, the beast which set all of this up hoping for escape was doing the same. The Kyuubi knew this realm well, for it was one that he helped create with his father and the other tailed beasts. A creation they made so that the future inhabitants of the world they lived in would never abuse the power of the dragons. And to seal away the one to help destroy humanity in the first place. The Kyuubi was now shaking not only in fear, but also due to the loneliness that had built up from years of being sealed up. Never to see his fellow tailed beasts again. The tears started to flow, and with it the Kyuubi shrunk into an average-sized adult woman. A dark red kimono covered her modesty. The 9 tails now wrapped around her as she assumed the fetal position in her cage. As she sobbed, which echoed about the room she was in, Kyuubi never saw 5 figures approach her, each with disappointment etched on their face. Back in the dragon realm, Naruto coughed and fell to his knees as the acrid air burned his lungs. He never felt the sharp lava rock puncture and gouge his knees and legs. I want to go home," Naruto hoarsely said, now afraid for his life. The Uzumaki tried to stand, but the lack of oxygen had started to cause brain fog, which made him stumble and fall down again. This time, he screamed in pain as the lava rock scraped and cut up his skin. This scream, however, was cut short as something large landed in front of him. Naruto dared to look at what had found him, and he soon wished he hadn't, for the beast in front of him was that of nightmares. Deep red eyes, like that of glowing rubies, stared deep into Naruto's soul while the onyx-scaled snout had started to smoke. A bright orange glow, of what Naruto could only think as fire, was between the beast's massive jaws. With a roar, The dragon let out its wings to show its massive wingspan and spewed a massive fireball into the air. Oddly, it seemed to hit a barrier once it reached a certain height. It was here that Naruto tried to run, but soon cried in pain as the dragon caught him by one of his talons and brought him up close and personal. Alduin growled as he sniffed the boy, a human, the race he despised the most. Many times had he tried to erase humanity, but many times he was defeated and cast away. His latest attempt was the closest due to help, but again he was defeated. This time, it seemed for good. Until Naruto showed up, that is. As much as I loathe those two-legged snacks, I smell great potential in this child. And Alduin sniffed again as he smelled something else within the boy, something familiar. Ah, so the Jubi does still live after all. Quote, Alduin smirked as a plan came to mind. One where he could use this child as his instrument of destruction. This was quashed as Naruto twitched and let out a roar as Kyuubi's chakra covered his body. In an instant, Naruto broke free from Alduin's grasp and used the power he had to punch the dragon in the snout. However, being only 6 years old, Naruto couldn't handle too much of the Kyuubi's chakra and passed out as he fell to the sharp rocks below. As Alduin reeled from the inhuman punch, some of his teeth broken in the process, he could only roar in anger as he saw his plan come to an end as Naruto was impaled upon the stones below. So angry was he, in fact, that the traitorous one let his anger control him once again. Naruto didn't feel the pain of the claws raking across his body from his right eye to his left hip, of which almost cut him in half. The only thing that Naruto felt was pure bliss as his soul left this world. Pure happiness that he wouldn't have to endure the stares of hate anymore. And pure joy that he would finally get to see the parents he longed to meet. Wake up, my son. A motherly voice whispered, which prompted Naruto to open his eyes. After blinking a few times, he looked to see a red-headed female next to him with 5 other people in a vast white space. Naruto was confused at first, but he soon remembered everything that led up to this. The smile on his face made everyone frown as they knew that Naruto's life should have been much different. However, certain actions by certain people had forced this timeline to occur. I'm finally free, Naruto whispered before looking at the red head beside him again, and the blonde spiky-haired man behind her. Although Naruto was shocked that the Yondaime was his father, having felt this at an instinctual level, and angry at those who didn't tell him, Naruto didn't care anymore as he had finally found peace. Parents and child reunited in a hug with tears being shed. Behind them the other 4 figures looked on in sadness. The one in the red kimono hurting the most. A hand was felt on her shoulder which made Kyuubi look into her father's eyes. Sad you are, Kurama, my child, but in those eyes I can sense a longing to forgive what you've caused. Kurama, the Kyuubi, couldn't bear to look at anyone, so she looked at the ground, which made the elder man sigh. You are but a part of this path which has led to this child's untimely demise. Do not dwell in the shadows of sorrow for this, Kurama, for he will grow to accept you in time. Hagoromo is correct. One of the other figures, a woman in a pure white kimono with long flowing golden hair and emerald green eyes, replied. Her face was that of perfection, like a goddess. I have foreseen a great future with this child, though that future will come at a cost which my heart cannot bear. The other figure, whom was dressed in a black-blue kimono and had pale, ashen skin along with dark soulless eyes, could only nod with a grin. A grin which was wiped out as the woman in the white kimono smacked him across the head. Why do you do such things, Kami? The man whined as he rubbed the back of his head. You know why. Keep it in your pants, Shin. The now revealed Kami replied back, which made Shin, the Shinigami, let out a perverted chuckle. So I really am dead, Naruto exclaimed, which made the 4 figures turn towards him. Oh, what makes you think that, child? Kami asked inquisitively, her angelic voice soothing those around her. Naruto didn't say anything but motioned around him, ending with a point at Kami and Shinigami. The latter of which chuckled and shook his head in disbelief. Here was a kid who actually believed in the higher powers, and believed that they were standing here so that they could judge his soul. Dead is a loose term, child. The Shinigami spoke in a gruff, raspy voice, like that of death. This is Limbo, the realm between the living and dead. Naruto blinked his eyes in confusion, he could have sworn being impaled meant death. And we aren't here to judge your soul. Instead, Cammy interrupted, all of us are here to help you cope with the next chapter in your life, one which has two paths for you to choose from. One which, Cammy paused to look at Naruto, whom was looking off into the distance. And you're not listening, are you? Naruto blinked and turned to Cammy. You say something. Even though the mood was very somber, everyone couldn't help but to laugh while Naruto looked at them with a smile on his face. Inu had taught him well. And I'm back, everyone, with a new story and new writing style. Hopefully this one is much better, for I hope to use it when rewriting my older works. I used to give out hints in ANs, but no longer will I do so. Please review and or give me any advice via PM on how to improve this new writing style. Flamers, however, will be ignored. I will start tri-monthly updates after this, 12 chapters per year, a schedule one hope to keep. However, my future career path will determine if this stays. Lastly, I hope this is different than other types of these stories on this site, and know this will not be a crossover. Some elements, however, might be added in later. Best regards, Random. Arc 1 Ch2. Arc 1. A New Era Begins. Chapter 2. Thick tobacco smoke hung in the air of the Hokage's office as one depressed Hiruzen Sarutobi began to digest what events had recently taken place from his seat behind his desk. It wasn't that long ago since Inu and Bor had given their report, one which left Hiruzen in the state he was currently in. More tobacco smoke joined the TCK acrid cloud above him as he puffed on his pipe once again. Not even his nicotine fix was calming him of the guilt he felt in his heart. The guilt of what he did to Naruto. The guilt of how he betrayed his sensei. The Shodai and Nadaime Hokage, as well as the Yondaime, Naruto's father. All three of them held the will of fire in their hearts, all the way until death. Hiruzen, the Sandaime, had a fire burning, but instead of the usual brightness and vigor, it was now only a spark. A sigh escaped his lips as he put his still-lit pipe on the desk before reaching towards the right where a hidden compartment lay. Inside was a bottle of the rarest sake one could find in the elemental nations. Cammy, did he need this now? The booze, however, had to wait as two puffs of smoke signaled a summoning in his office. As the smoke cleared, it revealed two people that Hiruzen didn't want to face right now. For he wasn't sure how much more guilt his old heart could take. Jiraiya, Tsunade, it's been a while. Hiruzen's defeated tone seemed to echo in his office. The silence that followed was palpable as the two senin looked at their sensei with extreme disappointment. This silence, which only lasted a minute, was broken by Jiraiya throwing a scroll onto the Sandaime's desk. Open it, was Jiraiya, the Toad Sage's simple instruction. His tone left no room for argument. Hiruzen did just hat and rose an eyebrow at what appeared to be a blank scroll. Looking closer, however, there was random ink blotches and smudges on the paper which told him otherwise. Something used to be on this scroll, but what? That, sensei, was a key, the Toad Sage said as Hiruzen looked up after examining the scroll. A very important key which Minato and I came up with before Kushina's birth of Naruto, just in case the worst came to pass. Hiruzen looked at the scroll again as sweat began to drip down the back of his neck. He knew what a key did, a fuinjutsu one at that. And to have it disappear meant only one thing. Hiruzen slumped in his chair as he threw the scroll back, which Jiraiya caught effortlessly. Naruto's gone, isn't he? It was more of a statement on Hiruzen's end. Hi, Jiraiya started. His disappointed tone was still steadfast. And I'm speaking for both of us, for Tsunade cannot bear to speak to you for what you've done. In fact, after what our summons told us, we are both red. Why to turn in our headbands and live the rest of our lives as retired shinobi or missing nin? Whichever comes first. But the village. Hiruzen started but had to jolt backwards as his desk was smoss head to pieces by Tsunade's super strength. Rare sake bottle included. It's always about the village with you. The slug sage had lost her composure. She couldn't sit idle any longer. You preached peace to all when you trained us. But go back on that word once the Yondaime died. You care no longer for the people, but only the village. You see them as tools, I bet, much like that scum Danzo. How dare you insinuate? Hiruzen was now standing, his glare full force, but it was all interrupted by him being grabbed by the scruff of the neck and forced to look into Tsunade's rage-filled eyes. "You used Naruto, sensei. You told me he would be looked at with care, not hate. Yes, I admit you did well on getting Megumi to help with his teachings, but she wasn't a Black Ops Anbu member for nothing, right?" Tsunade slammed her sensei to the ground before taking many deep breaths to calm herself. The sounds of papers fluttering to the wooden floor, which burst into the air upon the desk's destruction. As all that could be heard for a moment as Hiruzen got himself off the ground. Once he dusted himself off, he looked at both his students with stern eyes. "You may know of what your summons told you about Naruto, but you know not of the sacrifice I made to keep him safe from the encroaching darkness which plagues this very village." His eyes softened and his anger-filled tone was reduced to one of sadness. "I tried. By Kami I did. I tried to help Naruto as best I could, but I had to push him away." Tsunade and Jiraiya were now confused and also worried about whatever this darkness was. Asked what had happened since they were gone all these years. What had they missed? "I pushed him away, my surrogate grandson away." Hiruzen was now in tears as he remembered all that he had to do. "I lied, he knew it. And yet he still looked up to me." The Sandame's face was turning a light shade of blue while his breath started to quicken. "You know not of the monster I've had to become, of what? It was at this point Hiruzen collapsed, which made Tsunade and the Anbu rush to his aid. Running a quick diagnostic on her sensei told Tsunade that a heart attack and possible cardiac arrest was imminent. "Cat, help me get sensei to the hospital, he doesn't have much longer to live." The Anbu in the room paused as they felt their own hearts squeeze in their chests. They couldn't fathom the Sandame dying at a time like this. They were still healing from the Kyuubi attack and tensions had begun to rise in the elemental nations. An event such as this, if it got out, could spark a massive conflict. Kat pushed said thoughts away and nodded to Tsunade. As they were about to shunshin out, however, Hiruzen weakly pointed to the nearby bookshelf. "Third book, fourth column." The Sandame said in a whisper as his whole body began to shut down. "Take it out, add chakra, all will be revealed." The Sandame used the rest of his willpower to look at everyone in the room with a smile as he spoke his final words. "Failed all. Deeply sorry. Beware the undergrowth, reignite the spark." Silence. Nobody moved in the room as they couldn't believe what just happened. No, the Sandame was still alive, he had to be. The Sandame's body twitched, which gave everyone hope, but their hopes were dashed as Hiruzen's body remained still after that. Tsunade's eyes had begun to fog and her hands shook as she ran another diagnostic. Silence. Jiraiya's mind was shattered. Plain and simple. 6 years ago he had lost his student and the father to his godson. Now, he had lost not only his sensei, but his father figure as well. Jiraiya saw Tsunade run another diagnostic, which was followed by a shake of her head. No, he refused to believe this was happening. Without a thought, Jiraiya pushed a high. Lee distraught Tsunade aside and began using a small lightning jutsu in the hopes of starting Hiruzen's heart. Time was now a blur. Jiraiya had lost count of how many attempts were made to resuscitate the Sandame. A hand on his right shoulder made him pause and look into Tsunade's tear-streaked face. Silence. The 5 Anbu in the room looked at each other in disbelief, their masks now off and attached to their belts. Like Jiraiya and Tsunade, they didn't want to believe what they just witnessed. Hiruzen. Sarutobi was arguably the strongest shinobi in the elemental nations, yet he was brought down, killed by a simple bout of depression. Questions now arose on just what Hiruzen was hiding. Just what was in that book. Yes, they were the Sandame's personal guard, but they weren't privy to what Hiruzen did in his free time at home. Or during Hokage ears-only meetings. As much as they protested this, the Sandame always told them that he could handle himself and that he was far stronger than he let others believe. As Tsunade and Jiraiya consoled themselves, the Anbu all knelt down around their fallen Kage, their heads bowed low in respect. Silence. For the elemental nations would hold its breath, uncertain of the events to come. Volcanoes belched its molten interior and ash filled the sky as Alduin growled at the deceased body of what was to be his instrument of destruction, a second one at that. Again. It had happened again. The rage in his heart, his mind, had consumed him. A potential ticket out of this barrier, this accursed prison, was now gone. There were other options though. Perhaps he would wait for a more opportune moment to strike. Alduin, I challenge thee. The Forbidden One turned its glowing red eyes to whom called him only to find Bahamut and the dragon clan headed his way. Alduin snorted, which made a plume of acrid, onyx-colored smoke to blow out his nostrils. Bahamut already knew his answer, he always did. The barrier flickered for a moment as it recognized the Dragon King's signature. It was now safe to enter and the Dragon King took full advantage. Alduin barely had time to prepare as Bahamut rammed into his side full force, which sent him skidding a few feet. Claw marks now dredged through the volcanic soil. While the two almighties had begun battling each other, the force of which shook the landscape around them, Bahamut's son landed near Naruto's almost bisected body and shook his head with sadness. They were too late, it seems. A potential summoner lost, a potential gateway to their original home now lost forever. A roar from his fath made him look around to see that most of the clan was saddened to see this, yet a few of the elders still held hope. But why? This child was now in the Shinigami's clutches, and to go against a god was tantamount to suicide. Raise thine head, Tharos my son. Bahamut roared out after he swatted Alduin into a few petrified trees. All is not lost, for there is life within the boy. Merely between worlds is he. Tharos, who looked almost identical to his father, blinked in shock before looking towards one of the elders. The elder had light blue scales that shined aquamarine if the light hit her scales just right. And she was about half the size of the Dragon King. Her name, known to all, was Lyarenth the Life Giver for her expertise in the medicinal arts and her exploits in the Second Great War of old. But a spark left. This lad has Tharos, Lyarenth stated with an oddly charming voice, her eyes closed as she concentrated on Naruto's life energy. Giver of life I may be, but weary IG. Row for the chill of death will soon be all-encompassing. Lyarenth opened her emerald green eyes, but instead of sadness they shone weariness, for there was only one way to fix this. Back when the Dragon Clan was in its infancy, and their kind exalted as gods, some dragons had become attached to a human whom gave them gifts thanking them for protecting their village. Gold, silver, livestock, it didn't matter to the dragons, for they were content on keeping a peaceful relationship with the world. This peace, some dragons thought, could better be handled if they had a liaison which could spread their ideology and be ready to quell any uprising before it got out of hand. Thus, the blood ritual was born. A ritual that imbued the power of a dragon into a human, early attempts of which literally blew the person apart. Once perfected, however, the Blessed Ones, as they were called by their villages, would never leave the home of the dragon that chose them until fully trained. At first, these skills remained the same, but as time went on, the Blessed Ones and their dragons had evolved. And it wasn't just skills, but ideologies as well. After hundreds of years of peace, some began to see Blessed Ones and their dragons as tools for war. Oddly enough, some dragons had agreed with this, for grudges had built up on who owned what in their loosely led clan. There was no technical leader at this point, only the acceptance that each dragon would leave each other's personal area alone unless a dire situation presented itself. And thus the First War of Old began, where villages were wiped off the map and led to mass extinctions across the land. Nobody knows how long the war raged, but what they do know is that a Blessed One had somehow achieved the impossible and became their first true leader. His name was Eldroth, the Uniter of Worlds. An apt name, for Eldroth did much during his reign to ensure peace remained and that another war of old would never take place again. However, as the population slowly returned, there were the occasional attempts to start a revolt against the dragons. Ones which Eldroth did not stand for and quashed any hope of them gaining ground by killing the guilty party. Some of them being from the Dragon Clan itself. Partly because of this, the blood ritual was now and forever banned. Nobody knows exactly how long this struggle for keeping the peace lasted, for most records were destroyed in the Second War of Old, a conflict that was started when a princess, whom so longed for the fighting to end, wandered into a forest largely unmapped at the time. This forest hid many demons, the villagers said, and the princess soon realized this, for the deeper she went, the more whispers were heard. Some promising death to those whom entered, some urging her to turn around and go home. While another promised her what she cherished most, The princess followed the ladder and soon came upon a clearing where a decrepit, onyx-black tree stood. There, on the branch which hung the lowest to the ground, was a single oddly glowing fruit. The whispers began again and, in an almost trance-like state, she walked towards the fruit and picked it with a smile. As she ate it, a pulse went around the entire land which the dragon clan felt. Evil had tainted this world once again, and the dragons knew that keeping the peace would forever be impossible. For this evil was darker, more sinister, than the one faced in the first war of old, an evil which would only grow stronger as the years progressed, and would taint anyone whom was a glutton for power. One such dragon was a young Alduin whom had become enamored by the thought of war. He was raised in a loving family, both his parents and a younger brother by only 2 years. The parents always preached peace, and told horror stories from their time in the first war of old in the hopes that they would keep their sons away from the darkness. In the hopes that the stories would help them become a true leader of the clan. While the younger brother sided with his parents, Alduin decided otherwise as the stories sparked the darkness in his heart. Alduin hid this growing darkness, however, and got training from not only the elders of the clan, of which were pushing almost 400 years old, but also Eldroth himself. Although it took almost 100 years to learn almost everything his mentors taught him, Alduin was happy with the results and knew he was ready to enact his plan. As he was about to start Phase 1, a massive pulse of power was felt which made Alduin let out an evil grin. Without a thought, he flew to its origin and soon found an unconscious regal-looking girl next to a very ominous-looking tree. As he landed in the clearing, the princess began to stir and soon was looking into Alduin's glowing red eyes. Both smiled at each other as the tree whispered into their ears. Alduin is thine name, dear princess. Kagaya, O humble protector. It was through this meeting, and one forbidden blood ritual later, did the second war of old officially start. Blood ritual, Tharos whispered to himself, but it ended up being heard by all. Are thine mad, Lyarenth? Another elder, this one with reddish black scales and a scar running down his right eye, yelled. The eye itself a hazy gray which showed that he was blind. Mad, Lyarenth tilted her head in contemplation before snorting in amusement. Perhaps a tad, but what else do we have, Idrum? Before anyone else could question Lyarenth's decision, Alduin crashed down and slid on his side towards Naruto. Although in pain, the traitorous Nay sucked in a breath in the hopes of incinerating his failed instrument and all around him. Tharos, however, had caught this and promptly stomped on Alduin's head just as he was ready to blow a wide swath of fire. The fireball to be now exploded in Alduin's throat which made his eyes widen in extreme pain. It was only the second time in his life that this had happened, the first being the end of the second war of old before he was sealed. Before passing out, Alduin could only curse his parents for giving him a weakness such as this. Well done my son, Bahamut proudly said as he landed beside Tharos, a fine job, indeed. Said dragon smiled and bowed his head in thanks, but that smile turned into a frown when Idrum started to speak his mind about the barbaric blood ritual. Idrum the Fear, CE was his name for his exploits in not only the end of the first war of old, but the entire second as well. Fierce for he was just that in battle, and in tongue. The latter coming with age due to IDR, being the oldest clan member at almost 600 years. The argument had continued for almost 3 minutes now, way too long in Tarosa's mind. With a mighty roar, the son of Bahamut shut everyone up for. His eyes held malice which was a surprise to many for he was always known to be very quiet and well-mannered. Enough Idrum, my ears cannot take much more of your hearsay. Said Elder Dragon was about to advance, but became surprised instead when he was slammed into the ground by one of Tarosa's wings. The blood ritual is archaic and banned by the Uniter himself, but this dying child in NT of my talons was sent here for a reason. Bah, prophecies again. Idrum snorted out a plume of black smoke. We haven't had a seer in many years, son of Bahamut, the last one dying just after the second war of old started. Good riddance I say, is that a threat, Idrum? Tharos growled while his throat started to glow. I do remember reading in the archives about the mysterious circumstances surrounding that seer's death. Although the eldest in the clan, Idrum knew when to bow in submission. Everyone did when it came to Tharos. For if you threatened him, you had to deal with the king as well. Although only over 100 years old, young in dragon years, Tharos was mighty. Powerful for his age. Nay, Tharos, I submit to thee. Good, see to it that it stays that way. Tharos replied as the glowing in his throat ceased. His wing now back in place to let Idrum rise. My son speaks the truth, for I felt that this day would come sooner or later. Bahamut said to the entire clan. For too long have we spent in this plane of existence. For too long have we sat idle. This boy has appeared, for the darkness has returned, and he our only hope. Alduin began to stir, which prompted Lyarenth to heal Naruto enough for transport. With the utmost care, she picked the Uzumaki up with her talons, and with a nod, the entire dragon clan lifted off. As Alduin rose, the barrier now sealed, the dragon could only growl in disgust at the retreating clan. However, a slight smirk came to his scaly lips upon sight of the dragon whom has helped him in the past. Tsunade was now alone in the Hokage's office. The book Hiruzen had mentioned in her hand. Jiraiya and the Anbu had quickly shunshined Hiruzen's body to the Hokage estate so that Asuma and Konohamaru could pay their last respects and lay out a plan in secret. As the slug sage rubbed the top of the black hard-covered book, she could only think about the minor oddities she felt when completing her second diagnostic. An oddity of which only a highly skilled medic could have detected. Forgetting about the book for now, Tsunade searched the remains of the shattered desk and found the intact bag of Hiruzen's tobacco. Pocketing this for later analysis, Tsunade focused on the book once again, where she added chakra to it upon seeing her name in almost invisible kanji. With a slight glow, the front cover fell off to reveal a hastily written note of which was written 2 days ago. October 8th, 2 days before the 6th anniversary of the Kyuubi attack. I fear for this village, Tsunade, fear that I haven't done enough since the Kyuubi attacked 6 years ago. A great darkness plagues this village, this symbol of hope which my sensei built. I delayed such a thing during my first reign, but only slight, and it seems they have bested me at all turns this time around. No longer am I king in this game of shogi we are playing, but a pawn ready to be slain. Paranoia has overtaken me, for I fear some of my Anbu to be imposters, and the shinobi, whom I once controlled, would sooner turn on me to let the king come to power. Knowing you, my secret tobacco stash has been found. Study it, for I believe it to be laced with a poison, one I cannot detect. I haven't much time, my heart and lungs have grown weak. I've done all I can to keep the son of Minato and Kushina alive and free from the encroaching plague, but again I fear it was not enough. Read this, memorize it. Don't trust anyone, even your friends, and leave these hallowed grounds lest you be slain by the plague soon to be. Hiruzen Sarutobi. Tsunade double read the letter, her eyes wide with shock. Was this the reason why Hiruzen had us kept away from Konoha so long? Was this the reason why he didn't want us to be around Naruto? Her questions had to wait as she turned and landed a haymaker on whoever crept up behind her. A sickening crack was heard, followed by a loud thump as the body hit the wall, the neck at an odd angle. Broken and lifeless, the body slid to wooden floor below. Heart racing, Tsunade watched as the body of what was a trusty Konoha Anbu shimmer for a moment before revealing the true person underneath. Tsunade's breath hitched as she recognized the uniform. But there were some odd changes to it. Before she could search the body, however, it burst into intense flame, leaving only ash behind. The wooden wall and floor, oddly enough, wasn't even damaged. Committing what she saw to memory, Tsunade shunshined to the Hokage estates. Although the letter told her not to trust anyone, Tsunade knew that Jiraiya and the Sarutobis were loyal, were clean. The Anbu, however, was a different story. For Jiraiya and Asuma, whom held a 2-year-old Konohamaru, were surprised when Tsunade shunshined in and knocked out the Anbu that was with them. Jiraiya was about to speak up in protest, but the glare Tsunade was giving shut both him and Asuma up. No time, Konoha is no longer safe, hasn't been for a while now. Tsunade waved the book in her hands before throwing it to Jiraiya, whom began reading the letter Hiruzen wrote. Asuma, help me tie these Anbu up, we're taking them with us. Asuma had an idea what was going on, for his father had told him much. He had seen Hiruzen deteriorate these many years. Once a vibrant old man, He had seemingly started to rot from the inside out. Setting Konohamaru down, Asuma used the wire the Anbu had on them to tie up their fingers in such a way where jutsu couldn't be used. Suma, I'm scared. Konohamaru began to cry, even more so when he looked at his grandfather's smiling body on the nearby couch. I have no words. Jiraiya had just got finished reading the note whilst Asuma consoled a very traumatized Konohamaru. To think that the corruption went this far back. You knew. Tsunade sent an evil glare towards the Toad Sage. Jiraiya let out a sad sigh. No, not all of it, but I've had a hunch for a while now. My contacts are afraid of something or someone. Not surprising when I've found a few dead with a strange symbol carved into their chest. Tsunade raised an eyebrow at this as she remembered seeing a partial tattoo on the Foanbu's neck before it burst into flame. Before she could ask for a picture for comparison, Asuma yelled that the seals had collapsed and a large group of Anbu were headed this way. Not taking any chances, Jiraiya summoned a small toad which reversed summoned them all back to Mount Myoboku. Hiruzen's body included. I know I said I would post tri-monthly, but I think you have all waited enough. That, and my mind keeps on finding different directions for this story to go, hence the slow writing time for this chapter. Thankfully, I have a good direction to go in now, so writing should go quicker from now on. I tried patching most grammar mistakes among other things, but I will go through the chapter again tomorrow and make adjustments if need be. Thanks for being patient and I hope you enjoyed. Arc 1 Ch3. Arc 1. A New Era Begins Chapter 3. Bahamut had led his clan to the only place in their desolate landscape with a grove of trees and running water. This was a very sacred place to the Dragon clan, for it was the place where all blood rituals were conducted. Once on the elemental nations, the Sage of Six Paths had used the power of the Rinnegan to transport it here to their realm. Much like the seals used to hold Alduin in his domain, this too was protected by a similar barrier due to the toxic environment of their realm. The grove was massive, enough for the whole Dragon clan to move around comfortably. In the center of this grove was a shallow pond which shimmered with an odd bioluminescence. A pond where at its center held an altar, decorated with draconic carvings and runic language, where one could be laid upon. It was this very altar that Liorenth lay Naruto on before joining the clan which had congregated around the glowing pool. Silence engulfed the grove, for nobody in the clan had wanted to do such a ritual, as most had forgotten the proper steps to conduct it. However, there was but one dragon whom studied this ritual for many years so that he could learn from its strengths and weaknesses. To learn why such a ritual eventually led to not one, but two great wars, and how it led to them being put in this realm, how it led to them being forgotten to time. Tharos, Bahamut said to his son after a lengthy silence in the grove. You have my permission to start the bonding. Said dragon blinked in shock. Yes, he studied the ritual for years, over 30 in fact, but to read about it was one thing. Performing the ritual was a task in of itself. It honestly made the young dragon nervous. But father, stay your tongue and listen to my words, son. Bahamut interrupted with a smile on his face. I have Eiston watched you grow into a fine young leader, my wife and your mother's death being a catalyst into your study in the ways of old. You hath studied, now it is time to perform. You hath learned from the mistakes of the past. Now it is time to correct them. Tharos smiled internally at his father's words as it helped ease his mind. With a nod, Tharos closed his eyes and concentrated until his body started to glow. With a great exhale, Tarosa's body turned into ash which swirled around his glowing form. Soon, this ash consolidated and began to form a human shape. Within seconds, this ash turned into flesh and blood to reveal his human form. Taller than the average shinobi, Tharos had tan skin which was adorned with tribal markings. His feet up to his hips, and hands up to his elbows, were encrusted with blackish-orange dragon scale which resembled armor. Across his bare, tattooed chest, was a leather strap which held the sheath to the sword that lay across his back at a slight angle. His face was that of royalty, not a blemish in sight. His hair a short, spiky grayish color like that of ash. His toes and fingers shaped like dragon talons, just as sharp as before but with the dexterity like that of a human. His eyes, now open, were that of glowing lava, but they soon dimmed to that of a smoldering ember. All in all, a truly fearsome sight to behold. Tharos let out a deep breath and began stretching, for this form was rarely used in their realm. Bones and tendons popped like firecrackers while the light in the pond had risen and swirled around the young dragon as he began his trek towards a comatose Naruto. The whole clan watched in silence, in awe of what was about to take place. Everyone but one dragon, that is whom, used this moment to leave partly unnoticed. Partly, for nothing escaped the king's senses. Many tries, many failures, many lives, turned traitor. Killing favors, starts a war, killing saviors, our world no more. Sealed away, time has passed, became archaic, forgotten at last. Bahamut internally cried as he recalled the Enlightened One's final words to him. How low you've fallen, my brother. Tharos had reached Naruto, the light that had collected was now attracted into the altar, which made it glow a light bluish green. The runes, once dull and plain, were now pulsing with intense light which sent small ripples across the pond. It was here that the young dragon began chanting in the full draconic language. The blood ritual had begun. Death, life, begin anew. Human to dragon through and through. Thine blood is weak, no longer pure. A soothing aura had blanketed the grove, which made many of the dragons want to fall asleep. However, their interest of the events taking place had kept them from doing so. It was at this point that Eros quickly took out his sword and made a gash across his unprotected stomach. The sword was back in its sheath as blood started to trickle from the wound, drops of which landed in the pond, which turned the glow an angry purple. I offer my blood, dear gods above. To this human we have grown to love. My blood I give to them, so that their transcendence can begin. The glow, now turned mist, began to swirl around Naruto, which lifted his body a couple inches above the altar. The wind picked up, which swayed the mighty, ancient trees in the grove. As Tharos knelt to pray, his self-inflicted wound now healed. The mist around Naruto had picked up in speed. Guide him, O Great One, for whence the transfusion begins. For the pain will be immense, unforgiving. The mist was now a whirlwind, the glow in and around the pond almost too much to bear. Just when everyone thought they would have to cover their eyes lest they go blind, the howling wind stopped and the glow suddenly vanished. Both had followed the mist, which began to rush into Naruto's eyes and mouth, the latter of which was open in a silent scream of intense agony. Bones broke, only to be replaced by ones as strong as steel. Tendons and muscles ripped and popped as Naruto's body stretched and morphed to accommodate his new body. Finger and toenails began to bleed as they sharpened into that resembling dragon claws. It was here that Naruto's skin was set alight by strange blue flames, which dulled and created invisible dragon scales along his now naked form. Wounds inflicted by Alduin were now healed, even the partly gouged out eye, but scars had remained. The final transformation was underway as scales, like that Tharos wore in his human form, had encrusted themselves onto Naruto's skin. The Uzumaki's eyeballs were the next to transform. They were now a mix of sapphire blue and glowing embers. The black pupil within was like those of all the dragons, cat-like. The last to change was Naruto's hair, which now sported a shen-gray streaks in his spiky blonde hair. The glow around the pond had dulled, and any remaining mist was now lowering Naruto gently onto the altar. Once the Uzumaki's body connected, the mist had vanished. At the same time, a massive pulse of power was felt by the entire dragon clan, Alduin and the escapee included. The ritual had ended, the altar and pond had returned to normal, but Naruto had no pulse. Tharos began to wonder where he went wrong, while the rest of the clan held their breath in the hopes their new summoner, their savoir, would awaken. Just when Tharos was ready to apologize to his father for failing him and the clan, Naruto let out a bestial roar to the heavens before falling silent with shallow breathing. The entire clan let out an internal sigh of relief while the final words of the ritual were said. My blood now runneth through his veins, weakness no more. A new being will now arise, for the dragons long for a savior once more. Back in Limbo, Kami and the others had finished explaining what Naruto had to do to ensure a semblance of peace in the elemental nations. Everyone knew, even the sage himself, that true peace was unobtainable. The elemental nations was more war than peace. But there were those that longed for the latter. It was this ideology which clashed with the War Hawks, a clash which bred a never-ending cycle of hate. Perhaps in the future, a far distant one, true peace could reign. But for now the cycle would continue. Naruto, even though he was smarter than the average 6-year-old, still gazed off into the distance every now and again, for the speech had bored him. Although irritated by this, Kami couldn't fault Naruto. A task such as this was a heavy one, a burden that no child should bear. A burden that Naruto wouldn't have been put with had certain people stayed away from the child to begin with. It was here, amongst getting to know his parents better, that Naruto's form started to fade. You were waking up, a new life bestowed upon you, young Naruto. Kami said with a smile, but it quickly turned into a frown. Alas, the time with your parents has come to a close. Naruto looked mortified. He was finally shown the love and affection that all parents give their child, but now it was about to be stripped away. His happiness, his will to live, gone. Naruto was about to fall on his knees to beg for the deity to reconsider. He suddenly stood ramrod straight for a moment, his eyes glossed over. It only lasted a couple seconds, but once done the changes in the dragon realm had applied itself up in limbo. Before anyone old marvel the sight of Naruto's now hybrid form, the boy himself had marched right up to Kami and looked her dead in the eyes. Glowing, angry embers stared at a calm, yet powerful maelstrom. Neither blinking, neither moving, a dragon's growl built up in Naruto's throat that all could hear, a territorial call that one shouldn't ignore. Kami, however, was not like those back on the elemental nations. I've lived eons, boy. Kami started snidely, the smirk on her face matched her tone perfectly. More lifetimes than you'll ever live. Saw more death, more destruction, than you will ever create or see. Kami moved closer, which made Naruto growl even louder, his throat now glowing with fire. To me, you are just an ant that I could easily squash. Naruto had enough and roared, which sent the massive swath of white flame out of his mouth. It only lasted a couple seconds, but once everything had cleared, Naruto's mind returned to some normalcy. Kami's fit of laughter was the only thing that returned it fully. Not bad at all. Kami had a megawatt grin on her face, not an injury in sight. Quite the temper, but that's to be expected from a dragon hatchling. It was here Naruto looked at his hands and his body, which made him step back in shock. What the? Naruto stuttered as he began to examine the scales on his arms, finding them to be very coarse yet smooth. Quite the sight. Kurama. Hagoromo said as he looked to see her nod in agreement, then back to Naruto, whom was chatting with Kami. One I haven't seen in ages, since the time my mother was around. The Second War of Old and the beginning of the elemental nations as we know it today. Father. Kurama gave a confused look to the Sage of Six Paths as he rarely reminisced of his past. Hagoromo sighed as he turned and laid his hands on Kurama's shoulders. I won't be around this time to help save the world you cherished after the Jubi was split by my power. The sage's tired eyes were now locked with Kurama's brighter ones. It's been ages since a Dragon-Hybrd was made, the last time helped breed war yet end them all the same. Change is coming to the elemental nations, much needed change. Use my gift I gave upon my passing. Guide this young savior to the end of days, the end of time. For great hardship lay ahead, and you the only route to keep him grounded. But father, I don't understand. Kurama interrupted, her eyes alight with nervousness and confusion. Hush now, my young kid, and be steady. Hagoromo let out a smile as he backed away from her. In time, you will understand my words. In time, the gift I bestowed will show you the right path to follow. A slight pause had followed as Naruto yelled out in happiness for some reason. It made the sage's smile even brighter. I bid you adieu, my daughter. Treat him well. Kurama watched her father fade away with tears in her eyes, her form switching to one that matched Naruto's age. To her, it just felt right, for this was the beginning of a new life. One where she would make better decisions and not let anyone control her ever again. It's time. Kami's voice broke Kurama out of her self-reflection to see a smiling Naruto with his parents beside him. A nod as all the nine-tailed fox gave before she, Naruto, Kushina, and Minato had vanished from limbo and sent to the dragon realm. For the two deities, they knew that Naruto rebirth was the beginning of a very long, very bloody future for the elemental nations. One that neither wanted, but one that was necessary all the same. For the old would need stripped away before any new seeds were planted. Back in Konoha, the man who orchestrated everything from the fall of the Uzumaki clan to Hiruzen's death was royally pissed. And that was putting it lightly. He was assured that the summons wouldn't interfere, but they went against their higher-ups, defied the order in which the summon world was built. Tsunade and Jiraiya arriving was a major thorn, for he was to Elam. Innate any threads of loyalty to the third and fourth Hokages before furthering his agenda. And to make it worse, Hiruzen's body and the rest of the Sarutobi clan was taken to Kami knows where. The man knew that if word leaked out, the fire daimyo would come down on his ass hard. Hard being liquidating Konoha before rebuilding it from the ground up. The daimyo was an old fool, one that had been coronated shortly after Hashirama had passed. He had the same ideals Hiruzen and the Shodai had and didn't stop training even though he was well into his late 80s. Strong, able-bodied, and mentally strong, all of which the man didn't like one bit. Get Fugaku. The man ordered to one of his soldiers, he and I need to have a chat. The soldier simply bowed and left in assumption which made the man crack a small smile. Everything went well on his end so far, so this was no different. However, an inkling of doubt entered his mind. Knowing to trust his instincts, the man stood up from the seat at High's desk and walked over to the nearby bookshelf where an ancient-looking crystal ball was resting on the middle shelf. One touch was all it took for the clear ball to turn cloudy before revealing an angry-looking eye, a dragon eye. Instincts again, the dragon said with a raspy laugh at the end. I know what you seek, alas I gave all I could give. The king is watching me now, waiting for my next move. And I thank you for such a gift. But isn't there something you can do? Silence ensued as the dragon thought and looked around the area he was in. Sensing no danger in what he was about to do, the dragon's eye in the ball glowed for a moment before returning to normal. A boost to your plans, may it serve you well. As the ball returned to normal, the man could only smile at how things were turning out. A knock on his door stretched that smile even further. Yes, everything would turn out all right. As Jiraiya and the others arrived in Mount Myoboku, all became surprised to see most of the head summons there to greet them. In the front was Enma from the monkeys, Katsuyu from the slugs, and Gamabunta from the toads. Behind them were summons that they didn't even know existed up until now. Bears, panthers, spiders, among other creatures which inhabited the elemental nations. All the head summons was there, but why? Before any questions could be answered, Enma walked over and looked sadly at Hiruzen's body. Saying a silent prayer, the Monkey King picked his long and most loyal summoner up from the grass where he lay, gave a nod to Asuma whom nodded back, and disappeared back to his realm. Asuma knew that burying his father there would be for the best, for he knew that the Sarutobi name would always be associated with the monkeys. Gamabunta, why the gathering? Jiraiya asked as he looked at all the summons. Has something happened in the summon realm? Hi, and one Gamamaru, our great sage, hasn't seen since the formation of the summons realm. The toad boss replied, his voice turning grave. A rift between our realm and yours has opened, had been opened for a while now, but Gamamaru only saw it after young Naruto's passing. A rift meaning no contract required between us, right? Asuma asked, which only got him a nod in return from the boss toad. Hi, we know not of the person who found this rift, but our great sage has foreseen where this rift could possibly be located. A realm far older than us. One that had been locked and forgotten to time thanks to the Sage of Six Paths. That man was real, Tsunade questioned with a raised eyebrow, thought that guy was a myth. Sensei always said that rumors were based in truth, and that the impossible could be possible when it came to chakra. Jiraiya added with a smile coming to his face along with Tsunade's and Asuma's as they remembered that lesson well. The man is no myth. The panther boss decided to speak up. The summon was about half the size of Gamabunta, the voice oddly soothing for a feral beast. For he was the one to start the summon realms with the Forgotten Ones carrying on that knowledge to expand it to the one we all know today. Asuma was about to ask who these Forgotten Ones were, when he felt Konohamaru tug on his pant leg. Looking down, he saw the young Sarutobi about to fall asleep. Katsuyu had seen this and urged Enma back, whom took the two Sarutobi members to his realm. Raya and Tsunade would inform Asuma later about what they learned. Another interruption was had by the Anbu, who were all starting to wake up. Not wanting to take a chance at them seeing this, Tsunade knocked them out again. Traitors to the cause, Tsunade-sama? Katsuyu asked. Unknown, as Hiruzen told us not to trust anyone, even his own Anbu. Tsunade let out a sigh as tiredness started getting to her. Perhaps we can discuss who these forgotten ones were another time. The summon bosses looked at each other and nodded in agreement. It was a trying day for all of them, and rest would come few and far between over the next many years. Gamamaru had foresaw this, and the outcomes he had come up with worried Gamabunta and the other summon heads greatly. One outcome, which Gamabunta had been told before Tsunade and the others arrived, was that Naruto was still alive, yet changed. Whether this change was good or bad, the sage didn't know, which is why Gamabunta stayed silent on the whole thing. Losing Hiruzen was hard enough on their hearts, but losing Naruto was another nail in the coffin. Both Sennin had tried to hide this, but their eyes told all. 2 days, no later, for a situation such as this is dire. Gamabunta ordered, which the other summons had no choice but to agree. Once the summons had returned to their realm, the Toad Boss motioned for them to follow. For now, his would become their home until they were needed in the elemental nations. A place where Tsunade and Jiraiya would finish their sage training and use it to help Konoha become bright once again. The two Sennin looked at each other with a smile as they walked, their hands slowly intertwining. Naruto may be gone, but they still had each other. They would get through the hardships together, consequences be damned. For when they died, they knew they would be met with the smiling faces of all those they had lost over the years. Back in the Dragon Realm, Naruto sat up from the altar with a groan. His right hand resting on his throbbing head. As the pain subsided, Naruto's eyes opened to see that he was in a lush grove of trees with many dragons around him. At first, fear grew in his heart, for he remembered the experience with Alduin all too well, but it quickly subsided as he felt a kinship with them for some odd reason. One more than most, and that dragon was standing beside him just as Minato, Kushina, and Kurama arrived in the realm. Kurama, is that you? Bahamut said as he recognized the fox, but not in such a young form. Been many years, but hi, it is I. Kurama replied with a smile on her face. You de-aged, a lot older you were last you came here. I was given the chance at a new life, so I figured a redo would do my mind some good. Bahamut could see the pain in Kurama's eyes. And one look over at Naruto, whom was bonding with Tharos, made everything come together. The two ancient beings locked eyes and nodded to each other as they knew much had to be discussed. For now, however, it would wait. Today was a joyous occasion, for the blood ritual was a success and the first blessed one in what seemed like forever was created. Any training the hatchling needed could wait, for celebrations were to be had. With a giant roar, Bahamut glowed brightly before undergoing the same transformation Tharos did, the rest of the dragon clan following suit. Bahamut's human form was like that of his sons. But he was much taller, had more tattoos on his skin, and looked far more regal in appearance. Instead of black scales which encrusted part of his body, they were a royal reddish-orange color. And like his son, a sword was strapped to his back at an angle. To new life, this hatchling brings to our sacred clan. Bahamut began jubilantly, a rebirth worthy of celebration. May we welcome this hatchling and his guests with open arms, for they all will help us return to the land which we once inhabited. A new day is upon us. Let us rejoice, for the hounds of hell will soon be at our doorstep. And this hatchling before us our guiding light. As cheers went out around the grove, Naruto couldn't help but smile, even more so when his parents and Kurama gave him a hug. To Naruto, this was what he always dreamed of having. A family, a large one at that. All supportive, ever faithful. Worry grew in his heart, however, for Naruto remembered most of what Kami told him. Looking at his clawed hands for a moment made him wonder how many would die by his hands alone. He heard horror stories from the Sandaime and Megumi about the shinobi wars, gory details left out of course. But it was enough for Naruto to hate the thought of war. Tharos pushed Naruto's clawed hands down to his sides, which made the boy look at the dragon's eyes. Your fear is not unfounded, young Naruto. Tharos calmly stated, a small smile on his face. Yes, much bloodshed will occur in the future, but for now let us enjoy the festivities, the simpler things in life. It took a moment, but Naruto let out a sigh and nodded. With help from his parents, Naruto was taken off the altar before they all proceeded to join the rest of the clan. The smile was back on Naruto's face. Yes, he would enjoy today. A day with the family that he always wanted. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.